The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Wednesday, June 5th. We're moving well into the month of June. All right, hopefully everybody's having a good week, and we are going to jump into the news. A lot of news coming out of the Middle East. I mean, the just to give you a sense, the operation in Gaza continues. The war in Gaza. Israel continues to move forward with the attempt to destroy Hamas. There is a lot of diplomacy going on. The Biden administration is bringing out a lot of big guns, and they're putting a lot of pressure on the Saudis and the Qataris and the Turks. Turkey's involved, and pretty much the Europeans, pretty much everybody's involved in trying to put pressure on both Hamas and on Israel to make a deal. I think both Israel and Hamas have laid down kind of the line of what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do. Those lines do not intersect. There is no real deal on the table. Israel's made an offer. Hamas has basically said it's unacceptable. But there's massive amount of pressure, lots of meetings in Egypt and in Qatar and in other places to try to twist people's arms. Of course, I think all of this completely misunderstands what Hamas is and what motivates it and what drives it. We talked about this, I think, yesterday. The reality is Hamas cannot compromise. I mean, it is not going to change its long-term goal. The long-term goal for Hamas is being dictated to it by God. So there is no compromise with something that is clearly a dictate with God. They also view the longer this war lasts, the weaker Israel is. They think they can survive somehow one way or the other, and they're probably right. Again, they are much more focused on a very long-term solution, which is the complete destruction of Israel, than they are on this or that tactical victory or tactical defeat. So there's no reason for Hamas to compromise, and if they do, it'll only be because they estimate that they have some tactical advantage in doing so. Hamas is not going to change its ways. Hamas is not interested in peace. Hamas is not interested in a Palestinian state. Hamas is not interested in living side by side with Israel. Hamas is only interested in this sense. They are principled. They are integrated. They know exactly what they want and what they're willing to do to get it. And that is the destruction of Israel, and they will stick around until that happens, and they don't care. This is something the West doesn't understand, can't comprehend. The West has abandoned principles years ago, and today everything's flexible, everything's negotiable. Who cares about the long term? Long term doesn't exist. It's only about the short term, and let's go and have a drink. So those mentalities are clashing. Israel, of course, has shown its willingness over and over and over and over and over and over and over again to compromise, not to stick to principle, not to stick to the principle of self-defense, and not to stick to the principle of basically defeating one's enemies. So I think Hamas wins out on this game. They're just going to wait until Israel keeps moving in their direction, keeps compromising more and more and more and more, and they'll only cut a deal when it's clearly advantageous to them to do so. Again, we think that killing a lot of Hamas is winning, but the reality is that they don't care. They just don't care, and they don't even care about short-term defeat. I mean, it's not like Hamas ever thought they could beat the Israelis in war. They can't. What they are playing is a long-term game where they can basically drag this out for long enough so that they can recuperate, get another generation. They've still got the educational system behind them, and they will resurrect themselves and come after the Jews in 20 years. It's fine with them. They think in terms of generations, and they know we in the West do not. So that's going on. But in addition now, Israel is facing a real challenge in the north. So ever since October 8th, right after October 7th, Hezbollah, which is in the north, has been, sending missiles, projectiles, rockets into the northern Israel. North Israel, is a wide expanse. The regions, the areas from which the Hezbollah can send their missiles are far more wide and diverse than in Gaza. And as a consequence, they can actually do real damage on the Israeli side. They're using drones, they're using missiles, they're using pretty advanced technology, which they get directly from the Iranians. The difference between Hezbollah and Hamas is restricted to a very small geographic area, the Gaza Strip. Hamas had no direct contact with their Iranian masters or with the outside world. Of course, they could smuggle stuff in and out, but not directly. Hezbollah is very different. Hezbollah basically dominates Lebanon. Fighters, commanders, people within Hezbollah can travel freely inside Lebanon. They can travel into Iraq. They can go for training in Iran. Iranians can come and train them in Lebanon. Weapons flow from Iran directly into Lebanon and into Hezbollah. Now, some of those weapons convoys are stopped by destroyed by the Israelis, but most of them get through. It is a long border between Lebanon and Syria. It is a fairly long border between Israel and Lebanon. Not that long, but fairly long. And there's just a lot of opportunity. So there's a lot of opportunities. Hezbollah also has basically had training under fire over the last, 10 years or so? In the civil war in Syria, Hezbollah has fought on the side of President Assad. So they have had experience in actual combat. They have fought in combat in Syria. Again, they've been trained by the Syrian military. They've been trained by the Iranian military. And they've been supplied with the latest and greatest weapon systems that the Iranians have. And it's much easier to get the weapon systems in the hand of Hezbollah than it is to get them through tunnels to Hamas. So Hezbollah is better armed, better equipped, better trained than Hamas. Hezbollah is a Shiite organization, so they are much more closely affiliated with the Iranians than Hamas. But they share the basic ideology. That is, their ideology is an ideology of global jihad. Their ideology is an ideology of the establishment of Sharia law, of establishing of a global caliphate. Just they would like it to be Shiite, but at this point they think we'll get rid of the Jews and the Christians, and then we'll fight among each other to see if the Shiites or Sunnis win. In the past, the idea was among Shiites that global jihad would only happen once the Prophet came back, a little bit like Jesus coming back. But I think with the modern Iranian regime that has changed and shifted, so they are definitely interested in the global jihad. So in the past, Shiites were more pacifistic than the Sunnis, but that has changed over the last. Since the Iranian Revolution in '79. Anyway, the Hezbollah, just as motivated as Hamas, their goal, just like Hamas's is the complete destruction of the state of Israel. Their goal, just like Hamas, is wiping out as many Jews as they can from the state of Israel and integrating the area that is Israel into a greater Syria for them. Hamas, of course, is Sunnis that are interested in Syria. They would like to integrate Israel into the greater Sunni world. But anyway, those are details they can work out later. They basically want to wipe out Israel. They have no qualms about that. Hezbollah is just as brutal and has been fighting inside Syria and has been fighting the Israelis since Hezbollah was really founded in 1983, right? And the first actions of Hezbollah in 1983 were of the first Hezbollah operatives was the bombing of the U.S. embassy in Beirut, and then the bombing of the Marine barracks in Beirut, which killed, together, I think, close to 300 Americans, or close to maybe 370, something like that, Americans. They also were involved in kidnapping American personnel and murdering Americans. In Lebanon and other places around the world, they've also been involved in terrorist activities outside of the Middle East, including bombing these. I think it was the embassy and the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires in Argentina. They bombed the Kobar Towers, again a U.S. military facility in Saudi Arabia. That was a Hezbollah job. This is a group that's been around for a long time, longer than Hamas, or maybe about the same. I think longer. They were founded both in the 80s, Hezbollah a little earlier. Actually, probably more experienced than Hamas, again because of the war in Syria, but also because of the lengthy activities. They've been led by Nasrallah, who is the leader who lives in South Beirut for a very long time. And they are ready for war with Israel, and they've been held back, I think, by the Iranians, who, for a variety of reasons, have decided not to elevate everything into a big regional dispute. They're worried that the Americans might intervene, and they're worried about maybe their own nuclear deal. So they've been trying since October 8th to have like a tit for tat with the Israelis, where they don't push the Israelis so hard as to bring about a all-out war, but they cause enough damage to the Israelis to distract them from what's going on in Gaza, but they also to keep them just unbalanced, to keep them off balance. This has been the Iranian strategy. Over the last few weeks, though, the attacks have escalated, both the attacks that Hezbollah has done against Israel and the attacks of Israel against Hezbollah mostly in southern Lebanon have escalated and intensified since kind of the conflict between Israel, the direct conflict between Israel and Iran. We saw even more. We've seen, I think, intensification from Hezbollah in terms of their attacks on Israel, and it's getting much worse. And the damage that they are doing on the Israeli side is intensifying. The number of casualties on the Israeli side is intensifying. There's a huge asymmetry in the number of people that Israel's killing on the Lebanese side and they're killing here, but still well over, I think it's 350, over 350 known, admitted to Hezbollah operatives have been killed in Lebanon. That's in addition to others, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and so on. But over 350 known operatives of Hezbollah have been killed in Lebanon, many of them in the senior ranks of the organization, at least the field organization in the south of Lebanon. In the last few days, because of a number, the intense attacks from Hezbollah, and the fact that a few days ago, a bombing from Hezbollah led to massive fires in the north of Israel. It is now fire season in Israel. It almost never rains. June, July, August are completely dry, very much like California. If you live in Southern California, you know it like never rains in California. Isn't there like a Beach Boys song? It never rains in California, and summer in California, something like that. Anyway, it never rains. It doesn't rain in summer in Israel. And so it gets very dry. And as a consequence, that is just like in California, it is the fire season. Anyway, this is, they lobbed enough bombs into certain areas in northern Israel, and they're massive fires. Fires that have burnt down, large acreage, and have distracted both the military and the firefighting forces in Israel. Destroyed homes in certain villages and towns in the north of Israel. Anyway, it really does look like the tension on the northern border has intensified significantly. And that the situation now is that, we're on the verge of another war. That is, we're on the verge of taking tit-for-tat aerial bombardment for Israel, actually entering Lebanon and moving the Hezbollah, pushing them north of the Litani border. The Litani is a river. I can't remember how many miles north of the Israeli border, but pushing them far enough so that their access to the airspace of Israel is just that much more limited, and that Israel builds a security buffer in the south of Israel. This would probably require Israel to occupy the place for quite a long time, but this would require a real ground operation, a real struggle. This is not going to be easy. Again, Hezbollah is well trained, and pushing them to the Litani River might turn out to be not enough. It might mean that Israel has to push them even further north. Once you start pushing them into further north, you start entering fairly dense population areas along the coast. And then, of course, it's not that far to Beirut. Beirut is not that far. This is, of course, what Israel did in 1982, in the 1982 war with Lebanon. Basically, Israel pushed the PLO in those days out of southern Lebanon, but ultimately pushed all the way to Beirut and landed up occupying a big chunk of Beirut, not occupying, not most of Beirut, but at least the southern part of Beirut. And ultimately, that did not end well, and it created all kinds of conflicts and issues for the Israeli Defense Forces, and political and military and so on. This is where we are right now. There is indication that Israel has just called up 50,000 reserves soldiers. 50,000 is a big number in Israel. Israel is a small country. I don't think these are reserve soldiers for Gaza. I think Gaza is kind of pretty much fully manned. These are not, I don't think, reserve soldiers to replace the people in combat in Gaza. I think these are reserve units in order to beef up the units in the north, with the potential of these units entering into Lebanon and basically crossing the border and driving Hezbollah to the north. It's something to watch. It's a moving target, could happen any day. Of course, an action like that would have real consequences, I think, for Biden's push for Israel to compromise and for a ceasefire or exit of the Israelis out of Gaza. I think that Hamas would probably say, as long as you're in Lebanon, we're not going to stop in Gaza. So I think these have consequences, and they're linked. Things are... Israel's not in the news as much, maybe, but things are heating up, and things do not look like they're quieting down, at least anytime soon. Now, if you remember, those of you who've been following the show and listening to the show since October 7th on a regular basis, I basically said that this was inevitable, and I actually said that Israel should have preempted this instead of letting Hezbollah now for 7 months prepare for this and get ready for this and reinforce and its positions. Israel should have launched an attack and done it quickly and preemptively. That didn't happen. It's hard to tell how much Hezbollah could have reinforced their positions. I don't know. I don't have any intelligence. I happen to know, I guess, southern Lebanon. I can't really remember that well, but I know the geography. I've actually traveled through southern Lebanon, driven around the roads there, and it's not going to be easy, particularly if they cross the Litani and go further north. The mountains there are treacherous. They're difficult to travel through. Lots of places where Israeli forces could be ambushed by Hezbollah. Intelligence gathering is difficult because of the mountainous regions. Again, particularly north, the Bekaa Valley is an area, of course. And then the question is, what did the Syrians do? And do the Syrians stay out of it? That's not clear. And, of course, Israel does not have global support right now, whereas 6-7 months ago they had support from the rest of the world. Now they have lost a lot of that support. So it's a difficult situation. a fight will be difficult. The other thing has to be mentioned. In spite of all the attacks on Israel with rockets and drones and so on, Hezbollah has a massive supply of these. And now Israel's been bombing the areas in which they've been storing these things. But I think shockingly, surprisingly, I don't think Israel's either knows where they are, been willing to bomb them. Maybe they're all in very heavily densely civilian populated areas. I don't know. But my sense is that Hezbollah still has well over 100,000 missiles, and that's not including drones. We know that the Iranians are capable of building drones by the hundreds, by the thousands. One of the shocking things to me was that Israel didn't use the opportunity of going after Iran after the Iranians bombed Israel and destroying their drone building capabilities. That should have been a primary target in anticipation of this, of a war with Hezbollah and destroying the supply chain of drones from Iran to Hezbollah. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I really, I mean, a lot of it has to do with the Biden administration's pressure, but it can't be all that. It has to do something with the internal politics in Israel, something with their own, but it's not military. The response should have been to really cripple Iran's ability to help Hezbollah in a war with Israel. And that did not happen. And I don't get it. And I don't know when Israel's going to have another opportunity to do it. Attacking out of the blue, I don't think would be acceptable in the world in which we live. It was acceptable right then and there. So I don't know. I mean, the whole strategy of Israel is a mystery to me. Why they didn't go to Rafah early on? Why, the whole thing is it's very difficult for me to. And I'm not there. I'm not in the meetings. Even as a first sergeant in the Israeli army, Israeli military intelligence, in the 1982 war in Lebanon, I think we were very involved in what was going on and in the decisions around what was going on. Surprisingly so. We were marking the targets. We were identifying them. We were, this is the romantic activity my wife and I engaged in when we met. But we were quite involved in planning that. And that's where I know southern Lebanon from. And then when Israel occupied it, did go in there a couple of times. Anyway, something to watch. Don't know that's going to happen. Maybe they'll avoid it. Maybe somehow they'll avoid it. Maybe I think there's a lot of pressure inside Lebanon by the Lebanese authorities, the non-Hezbollah Lebanese authorities, by the Lebanese army, by the Christians, by the Sunni Muslims in Lebanon, to try to convince Hezbollah not to engage in this war. But if there is, you could see thousands of projectiles heading towards northern Israel on a daily basis. And I don't know that Israel has enough, just in terms of quantity, of its aerial defense systems to knock them all down. And it will have to prioritize, and it will probably prioritize the industrial area around Haifa. It'll probably prioritize Haifa itself. And that means that it will have to allow a lot of these rockets to be launched on many of the areas in the north of Israel that it just will prioritize lower than it can prioritize Haifa. And Haifa is a major city of the north, but also around Haifa, particularly to the north of Haifa, closer to Lebanon, along Haifa Bay, is basically you got refineries, chemical companies. That is if you will, the industrial, heavy industry heartland of Israel. That is where heavy industry. You've also got defense industry, and so that is going to be the priority to defend. And there's going to be a lot of residential, a lot of softer targets that are probably Israel won't be able to protect. Anyway, a mess, a complete and utter mess. And one of the problems is when you don't initiate, when you don't have the primary initiative, you let the enemy take the initiative. you're at a disadvantage. No question, you're at a disadvantage. All right, much more to come on this topic, as we know. Much more, because this is not going away. The war in the Middle East is going to continue. It's going to take different forms and different shapes and everything, but nobody is talking about what needs to be done in order to stop this war. There was an opportunity after 9/11 to really eradicate Islamic totalitarianism, to open up against Hamas and Hezbollah and all the rest of them. That would have been my strategy if I were Bush, but that wasn't the strategy America took. And we are paying the price, and we will continue to pay the price. And by the way, once in a while, it's not a bad thing to say, I told you so. I told you so right after September 11th. I told you so in 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Every single year, I told you so. And what's happening right now is a one big, horrible, disastrous, scary, depressing, I told you so. Just go back and listen to my talks from back then, and you'll see. I really did. All right. Also, I told you so. Biden signed an executive order to limit new asylum requests, demands, new asylum admittance into the United States from people crossing the border illegally. So right now, before this executive order went into place, basically people would come by the thousands, tens of thousands, cross the border, and basically say, "Oh, we're seeking asylum." And supposedly, the law, as interpreted by the authorities, is that they have every right to do so, and there's nothing in the American law that prohibits them from doing so. And indeed, the American law prohibits the United States from kicking them back. And the only reason that Trump was able to stop them and send them back was that during COVID, there was an emergency declaration, and we got an emergency statute in place that allowed the U.S. to basically turn them around and send them back to Mexico and not admit them in, even when they came in illegally. But COVID emergency is over. We can't do that anymore. And the big spike during Biden was supposedly because he didn't have the tools to stop them. This is America. American law just lets them in, right? Joe Biden just basically is challenging that this morning by signing the executive order. He's basically saying it's within the president's purview. The president has the authority and has the ability to change immigration law so that, in the way this particular executive order is written, 2,500 people who cross the border illegally and who are seeking asylum will be admitted into the United States on average a day. The rest will be sent back across the border to Mexico. And that will happen immediately, just like it was, I guess, under Trump, right? Now, 2,500, it still means almost a million million asylum seekers a year. I don't know that the United States has the capacity to handle almost a million asylum seekers a year, but that's what it is. And this is, of course, part of the criticism that it's too little and it's too late. Millions have already come in under this asylum principle and are living in the United States waiting for an asylum decision. Of course, part of the issue is because so many are coming in because of this issue of asylum, the courts that would decide whether you are a legitimate asylum seeker or not are backed up many years, and they won't clear for a long time. And in the meantime, these people are here in a kind of a gray zone. They're not completely legal. They're not illegal because they're here waiting for their asylum decision. So it makes no sense. Anyway, this is a way to cap the number of people coming in on a daily basis and to cap it on an annual basis. But it still lets in a lot of people, and Republicans will criticize it. Now, of course, the Republicans are saying, why are you doing this now? Why didn't you do it 2 years ago? Why are we sitting this for 2 years? Biden is basically saying, I don't have the tools, I don't have the ability. Earlier in the year, Biden negotiated a deal with Republicans, which was actually even more restrictive than this executive order. And Republicans, for purely political reasons, basically because Donald Trump told them not to, rejected that deal that Biden cut with with Senate Republicans. Rejected that deal, and he rejected that deal in order to keep immigration an issue all the way till Election Day, because Donald Trump knows that his strongest election issue, other than Joe Biden's capabilities, other than Joe Biden's brain and age, that the strongest claim Trump has against Biden and for being president is the issue of immigration. So that is the idea was that Trump needs this issue. And really, why is Biden suddenly doing this? Because he needs to take immigration off the table. He needs to have at least some semblance of normalcy, of sanity on the southern border if he's going to get elected. Because the reality is, justifiably or unjustifiably, whatever you think about immigration, the American people are really, really upset by it. The American people don't like what's going on the southern border. Again, justifiably, unjustifiably. And from the perspective of the politics of it, it's a disaster for Biden. So Biden is suddenly clamping down. Now, I mean, this is the thing from Biden's perspective. This is indeed too late. Why are you doing it now? I mean, I know the debates are coming up, so he's got a debate with Trump in a couple of weeks. But, it takes, for any action you take, it takes a long time for it to sink in with people. The impact of it, the significance of it, the meaning of it, it takes it a long time to actually sink in. So if you wanted the idea that you're actually restricting immigration, if you want the idea that you're actually in some way tough on immigration, then you had to do this months ago. It's too late now. I mean, Americans are convinced this is the number one most important issue. They're convinced they're being, quote, invaded. They're convinced there's a crisis on the southern border. And to convince them otherwise, again, takes months. And you don't have months. You don't have months. So politically, this is way too late. Way too late. And I fear for Biden that, Trump already has this issue, and it's going to be almost impossible to stop it. I mean, notice how the extent to which Trump has the issue. The first thing Trump said when he walked away from, the guilty plea, the guilty verdict on the case, a week ago. So the first thing he said was, those illegal immigrants coming in from the southern border, da-da-da-da-da-da. I mean, Trump will not shut up about it, and it doesn't matter what Biden has done. Trump will not shut up about it, and people will buy what Trump is selling because he's selling fear, and fear is always easy to sell. Again, Biden needed months to convince the American people there wasn't a problem. He needed to do this months ago, and then as soon as the Republicans turned down his proposal, legislation, he should have done the executive order, and then he could have blamed the Republicans for not even being even tougher, because the fact is the legislation was tougher. The fact is the legislation was probably the best legislative deal for Republicans, not for immigration, not from my perspective, from Republicans' perspective, the best deal they'll see in a long, long time, because I don't think they'll have enough votes in the Senate to pass what they want. But they had enough votes in the Senate to pass a pretty tough bill on immigration, which they claim they want. It just shows that when the issue is weighing what's good for America from their perspective, not what's good for America objectively, what's good for America from their perspective, and politics, i.e. what makes them look good in terms of electoral politics, they will always go with politics over what's good for the country. They do not care. Trump doesn't care, and the Republicans doesn't care, and Biden doesn't care, and Democrats don't care. The politicians just don't care about what is good for the country. All right, let's see. Let's see. All right, so that's where we are on the immigration debate. All right, let's see. Putin. Europeans are really worried, right? So over the last few weeks, months, it appears that Russia has been engaged in a real kind of undercover, behind the scenes, covert, really attack on a variety of different European countries. Just to give you a few examples, Russian nationals have been arrested in Germany on charges of planning to attack military facilities. English prosecutors have claimed that Russian agents set fire to a warehouse containing aid for Ukraine. Sweden is investigating alleged Russian-sponsored acts of sabotage. The Czech government accused Moscow of sabotaging its railroad. Estonia has reportedly uncovered a host of Russian plots on its soil. Russian ships are suspected of targeting communication cables and wind farms in the North Sea. And now, in Poland, they're claiming that Moscow might be involved in a number of fires, one of them that engulfed a shopping center. And this list just keeps going on, and it's almost like a daily, weekly thing. And the argument is, and it doesn't seem to really be challenged by anybody, that Russia is behind this, that Russia is escalating this, and that Russia is determined to find a variety of different ways to destabilize Europe, destabilize the NATO countries, to prevent, of course, aid from Ukraine, but also just to make them worry, make them think twice, and be less prepared for any kind of conflict if a conflict arose between NATO and Russia directly. Russia is still not doing as well as it wanted, as well as it thought it could, as well as some people expected in Ukraine. In spite of its offensives this spring, and in spite of the small progress it has made this spring, it's still not making any significant breakthroughs and suffering real damage in places like Crimea. In its Black Sea fleet has basically been decimated. They've literally moved some of their Black Sea ships into the Caspian Sea to get them away from the Ukrainian missiles. And now they've been stopped in Kharkiv. They're not making any real progress in Kharkiv, and actually lost ground in Kharkiv. So Russia's not advancing much in Ukraine, but it is engaged in terrorizing the Ukrainian people, making the cost of war very, very high. And I think their reasoning is make the cost of war very, very high in Europe as well, not making a hot war, not making an explicit war, but do enough to wear people down, They're basically trying to send a message that they can affect any European country whenever they want. They want to instigate fear. And I think part of the hope is that in the coming elections, just like happened in Slovakia, that parties of the right who tend to be, not always, but tend to be pro-Russian, are elected in some of these countries in Europe, and that they start, again, creating chips in the NATO and European Union support for Ukraine. This is sad, disturbing, and so on. But they have it. Putin is in a significant shadow with the West. I'd also say that Putin, the Russians have just improved their capacity to provide disinformation and to provide intervention in elections. So they're definitely all over the European elections, and particularly with the election for the European Parliament coming up. The Europeans expect massive disinformation campaigns coming out of Russia. And there's no question they're going to be trying to intervene. And in the U.S. election come November, on a massive scale. So expect all of that to happen. I don't know there's much that can be done about it. Sadly, Europeans and the American people seem to be highly susceptible to misinformation, particularly coming from China and Russia. And those two countries are going to use that fact to create as much havoc as they can within the United States and within Europe. All right. Just a story we've been following for a while, but I don't want you to forget it, and I want to emphasize it again because I think it's really, really important. Nothing dramatic has happened, although there was one kind of funny story that did happen the other day. Anyway, the Houthis. You remember the Houthis? Houthis in South Yemen. The Houthis in South Yemen are still there. They're still launching missiles against ships. They've still basically cut off the Red Sea. They've limited shipping through the Suez Canal. They have significantly created, clogged up shipping in major Asian ports. They've created shortages of containers, where they're not where they're supposed to be. They have dramatically increased shipping times to the U.S. and to Europe. They've increased freight rates, which are soaring. They're not just increased, they've expanded dramatically. So they're raising the cost of goods in Europe, also in the United States, primarily in Europe, though. The Houthis, this nobodies in Yemen, are creating havoc in the world economy. And the coalition that the United States put together to put an end to it has done nothing or very little to stop them. The Biden administration has been pathetic in its response to the Houthis. They've been weak, and they've allowed them to continue to block the shipping. They've continued to allow them to harass shipping and to create these economic dislocations in the Western world. A bunch of tribal barbarians are holding the West hostage, and it's 6 months already. And the United States can't do anything about it. Can't do anything about it. And this has everything to do with, again, the way we fight our wars and the way we engage in fighting for our own interests. It's an embarrassment. It's pathetic. And I think Don says, stupid. It's stupid. Absolutely, Don. It's stupid. And I assume Don's talking about what I'm talking about. And it's more than that, it's sad and immoral. I mean, the Houthis should have been taken care of in a week. But civilian casualties and disproportion, and it's just economics, and, they're not threatening American lives. Anyway, talk about American lives. The Houthis did announce, when was it, a few days ago, that they had launched a barrage of missiles against an American aircraft carrier. They also claimed that they had made a direct hit on the aircraft carrier, and the aircraft carrier was significantly damaged. Many people online, on Twitter, echoed those arguments, including some so-called military experts in the United States, the kind of military experts that love the Russians and tend to be anti-American. They put up all kinds of pictures of the American aircraft carrier burning or at dock under repairs. Of course, it didn't take much to discover that a lot of these photos were AI generated, or that one photo at a dock being repaired was a photo of a Russian aircraft carrier. It had nothing to do with the U.S. But it was stunning to me. I keep seeing this. Talk about misinformation, talk about lies, and talk about actively supporting the enemy. It seems like a significant number of people, and most of these people tend to be on the kind of alt-right, the kind of right that supports Russia, and that wants us all to believe that America and the West are weak, maybe because Biden's president, but maybe just because they're anti-West. The number of people who came out in order to say, oh, no, don't listen to the mainstream media. The mainstream media is claiming that their aircraft carrier never got hit. Listen to us. We know. We have the real truth. Which they didn't. They had AI doctored images. The captain of the aircraft carrier actually showed photos of him walking his dog on the deck. They also showed images of the shops on the aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers, I don't know if you've ever been on one. They're like little cities inside. I think I visited one when it docked in Haifa, I don't know, 50 years ago or something. I don't know. And 45 years ago. And it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, they have little malls on there, shops, and thousands of Navy personnel, and of course the airmen and the aircraft, and the whole mechanism of raising the aircraft on top. It's just a technological marvel, these aircraft carriers, yeah, I mean, the idea that the Houthis could put down an American aircraft carrier is a joke. They're defended by not just their own air defense systems, but they have a number of ships that travel with them everywhere, a number of combat ships that are responsible for knocking down anything sent in that direction. I mean, I could imagine that maybe the Chinese could do it, but the idea that the Houthis could do it is laughable, and ain't happening. So, yes, the aircraft carrier was not damaged. It is fine, and you know what? Be very, very, very careful. Be very, very, very careful. Basically, of anything you read on Twitter, on any news site, but primarily, I'd say, in comparison, the mainstream media are unbelievably objective in comparison to the alt-right media sources and some of the sources on Twitter. Now, we know that the mainstream media are massively biased and massively well, the alt-right stuff is like not just massively biased, it just makes stuff up. Now, you could argue some of the mainstream media is made up, but it's basically made stuff up, and its major source is probably Russia TV, Russia Today, RT. You remember RT? I was on RT a couple of times. I think I was on, I forget the leftist's show. I debated him a couple of times on RT. He was terrible. Wouldn't go on RT today, though. All right, let me take a short break here and remind you that this show is supported from financial support from listeners, viewers like you. Yeah, it was Tom Hartman. Thanks, Frank. Tom Hartman. So I can't do this show without you. does not happen. You can support the show on Patreon. You can support the show on PayPal and yaronbrookshow.com/membership. You can support the show on by getting a membership here on YouTube. But for most of you who are listening on various platforms, other platforms, or on YouTube after the fact, please consider making a Patreon monthly contribution or making a contribution on PayPal. And in particular, if you can afford it and you can make something around $100 a month or $250 a month or $500 a month, really it's the people who do that are to a large extent responsible for 80% of the money that comes in. So if you can afford to do that and it's a value for you to do that, then please consider doing it. Also, a reminder that those of you here live on the super chat, on the chat and listening on YouTube live, please consider using the super chat both as stickers and by asking questions to contribute to the show. We have goals that kind of I set based on what we have to make for a month. We have daily goals. We try to meet them. We try to meet them on average over the month. There's Silvanos helping us out a lot, and with $100. Silvano says, I tried to talk about nukes and Houthis, and YouTube didn't like it. Huh. Well, maybe, when you spell nukes and we spell Houthis, put some other characters in there so YouTube doesn't know exactly what you're saying or what you're talking about. But it would be great to get a question from you on that issue because we just talked about it. So now would be a good time. Thank you for the $100. Really, really appreciate that. That gets us to our first hour's goal, which is almost to our first hour goal. We're like $13 off of that, away from that. But yeah, please find a way to ask it, getting around YouTube's efforts. I put my comment underneath. Where is underneath? I don't see it. So does that mean it's coming or you've already done it? I will put. I don't see anything from you, Savannah. Sorry. On the chat. I don't see anything on the chat. So put it now. Put it now in the chat when I'm paying attention and can follow. Put your comment and I will read it. And put it in code so that try to fool the YouTube AI. Jack says, thank you, Yaron. I'm on a ladder cleaning gutters right now in Colorado. Please don't super chat me while you're on ladders. Thank you, Jack, but please, I don't want to, don't fall. Don't hurt yourself trying to support the Yaron Brook Show. I can wait until you get off the ladder and onto solid ground. Anyway, in the meantime, let me thank for their stickers, Alex, RDF, and Robert. You too can do like a $2 sticker like they did. And Silvanos, I'm still looking for your, I'll keep an eye out for your question in the chat and see if I can identify it. I haven't seen anything yet. I don't know how I missed it. Or maybe I haven't missed it. I don't know. All right. Let's see. Oh, John, you just asked a question about a topic that I'm going to be talking about in a little bit. So that is on my news of the day list, is what you're asking about. All right, I want to say just a few things about Nigel Farage. Maybe I misspoke yesterday. I was criticized for misrepresenting Farage a little bit yesterday, so I'll say a few things. So Nigel Farage, representing the Reform Party in the UK, has announced that he is running. That has reinvigorated the entire Reform Party agenda. There is now a real concern, I think, among the Tories, that this could take votes away from them and kind of split the right vote so that Labour would win more seats. But there's an alternative view, which is that what will happen is that Reform will actually win almost as many seats as Conservatives, and that Reform will become the third largest political party in the UK at the expense of the Conservatives. The Conservatives are going to get wiped out anyway, and now they were wiped out even more, and they might steal some seats from Labour, because a lot of the Labour, stuff is, Labour. Well, Labour, for example, is anti-Brexit. So a lot of people are voting for Labour because they hate the Conservatives, because the Conservatives have done such a bad job, and they have. And so they're voting for Labour because of that. Well, now they've got an alternative. They don't have to vote for Labour, and they don't have to vote for Conservatives. So there is it seems like there is a real belief out there that this new political party has a chance to actually capture a lot of votes from Labour as well. So what you would get is, Conservatives are wiped out no matter what. But now the question is, do the Reform Party take not just from Labour seats, but do they also take seats not just from the Reform Party, but also from Labour? And if they can take it from Labour, they can completely rejuggle, reframe the entire political debate in the UK. It could be massive and impact for years and years to come. Hard to tell how it's going to play out. We'll know in a month. Polls are not as useful. Polls are usually overestimate the power of the left in the UK, at least in the last few elections. And the right usually does better than the polls. But now with a third party, it's going to throw the polls completely up in the air, so it's going to be very difficult to tell in advance how this is going to play out. Now, what is Farage? Farage is very pro-Brexit, very pro-Brexit, and he continues to be pro-Brexit in spite of the failure of Brexit so far to bring any more freedom and any more liberty to the UK. It's hard to tell what Farage is for overall. So I looked at his website. He's got a website dedicated to himself where he's got articles on a bunch of different things. And the reality is there's not a lot there. He isn't very vocal about particular issues. His main issue is immigration, just like Trump. That is the issue. That captures the imagination. That gets the xenophobes excited. And the only way to win is by exciting the xenophobes. So, Sylvanus, looks like YouTube censored it. They censored even your comment, right? Send me an email with it. Yaron@yaronbrookshow.com. Send me an email with the question that you put $100 in. You know, $100 is, YouTube doesn't want it. It's not exactly clear where he stands on economic issues. You look at his website and you press on the economics tab and it has almost nothing in it. And stuff that's not that important and not that relevant. He was the man who made Brexit happen. Now, was Brexit good? Big question mark. I'd say by the evidence so far, no. By the evidence so far, would have voted against it. Is there potential to make it good? Sure. Doesn't look like the British are interested in it. Nigel Farage, some people claim he's pro-free trade. Don't see any real evidence for that in a sense of anything that he's proposing, anything he's pushing. Quite the contrary. Part of exiting Brexit is anti-free trade. But the argument is, no, he's for free trade, he's just anti-immigration. Again, all I see is the anti-immigration. All I see is the anti-immigration. That seems to be the single topic for the right. They don't want to do economics. They only want to do immigration and attacking the left. That's it. That's the only thing that unites them. And again, people who know more about British politics tell me Farage is quite good. That he's good on free trade, that he's good on the welfare state. He wants to shrink it, doesn't want to eliminate it, but he wants to shrink it. He's good on regulations, that he's good on these things. I think he's part of the establishment. I really don't think he's different than the establishment. He strikes me as another Donald Trump, drain the swamp. No, just bring my swamp animals to a place with your swamp animals. I don't see any real evidence, and I'll wait and see. I'm got an open mind on this. I don't see any evidence that Farage is a force for the good, if the good means individualism and capitalism. I just don't see it. I see a heightened focus on collectivism, a heightened focus on tribalism, a heightened focus on nationalism, a heightened focus on anti-immigration, which goes together with all the previous ones, and a complete and utter neglect of actual liberty and actual freedom. But we will see. We will see. It's going to be interesting to see what comes of the UK election in exactly a month. It'll be interesting to see whether there is whether the Reform Party has any impact, and whether that impact is for the good or for the bad, for good or for evil. What's the impact going to be? All right. Let's see. All right. I just want to reinforce a story we talked about yesterday. But I'm just seeing more and more headlines on this. People are really worried and people are panicking. The Mexican election went really, 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 really well. This is the opposite of India. India, Modi didn't even get a majority. I mean, people are really, I think, speechless and in shock. I mean, the election in India went against all expectations. The right-wing, anti-left, nationalist candidate didn't even get a straight-out majority. Never mind a supermajority, which was what he thought he was going to get. And as a consequence of that, Modi is going to have to negotiate for some kind of coalition government. Anyway, the opposite is true in Mexico. In Mexico, the populist leftist has won an overwhelming majority. And the fears in Mexico is that that majority is going to allow them to change the Constitution. And the fear is, what is going to happen over the next 6 years? Because what's happened over the last 6 years is, while the economy's done okay, a lot of that, you could argue, was because of short-term stimulus, which will have to be paid for in the long run. What is this Mexican government going to do once it can no longer provide short-term stimulus? And given the state of Mexican violence, this is the most violent year probably in modern Mexican history. The estimate is 30,000 homicides each year during the period of López Obrador's presidency. 200,000 altogether. Tens of thousands of people missing. We talked about this. So violence. On top of that, there was real fear. Markets are down. The peso is down. When they first announced that this woman had won, this leftist senator had won, Claudia Sheinbaum, the response was positive. Markets went up. But once they realized by how much she had won, and the size of her majority in Congress, people are really worried. People are really scared in the sense that they have too much, the left now has too much control over Mexico. And markets are retreating. And that there's now no checks and balances on the executive power of Claudia Sheinbaum. And of course, Claudia Sheinbaum is expected to just be a pawn with Lopez Obrador in the background. Another interesting country to watch, Mexico. All right, let's see. We have a couple of more stories, and then I'll basically take your questions, and we'll see where we go from there. Oops. All right. I see Mira Benz continues to use the super chat in order to flirt with her boyfriend. I think that is the purpose, which is fine because she leaves dollars that I collect. So she's paying me to use my chat to flirt with her boyfriend. I'm cool with that. Let's see. All right. AI. So the AI panic corps are out at it again. A group of OpenAI insiders is supposedly blowing the whistle on a reckless culture within the company, a culture that is placing profits above safety concerns, a culture within the company that is leading to too much power to AI, which it could then use supposedly to kill us all, to harm us, to damage us. The members are saying that OpenAI, which started, of course, as a nonprofit research lab and that was dedicated to safe AI, has abandoned its emphasis on safety. And instead, since the launch of ChatGPT, it is putting the priority of profits and growth and trying to build what they call artificial general intelligence, which is a conscious computer. Or a computer program capable of doing anything a human can. They also claim that OpenAI has used hardball tactics to prevent workers from voicing their concerns about the technology, including restrictive non-disparagement agreements, and they are complaining that they can't complain. Of course, I believe that their worries are ill-founded. They come, I think, from a misunderstanding of what human consciousness requires, what human consciousness is, what it constitutes. It comes from a belief that you can just, if you put enough chips in a row and you write the right algorithm, it'll just, consciousness would just arise. I think that is wrong. I think that is an impossibility. But they are worried. There are all kinds of fears about what AI could ultimately do, starting from just being able to help bad guys produce really bad weapons, whether chemical weapons, biological weapons, other types of weapons, all the way to the AI itself deciding that it didn't need human beings and wanting to wipe us all out. That because their concerns are not being taken seriously, that the safeguards are not being put in place to prevent that from happening. In addition, there's a computer scientist by the name of Jeffrey Hinton. Jeffrey Hinton is given a lecture at the University of Chicago about AI and about the existential threat that AI constitutes. I am debating Jay Dyer. Do you guys know anything about this Jay Dyer? I have no idea who this guy is. So I heard you're debating Jay Dyer Friday. I think this will be a very good matchup for both of you. If this upcoming debate is real, then good luck. Yes, it is real. Let me know who he is. I have no idea who he is. Let me know who he is. Anything I should know about him that would make my debate better. Maurice says, "Oh Lord, bad mistake." Why is it a bad mistake, Maurice? I don't know. I accept these propositions from people asking me, he's a philosophy nerd, all right? Well, what does that mean? He's an Orthodox Christian apologist. He is well trained in philosophy. Okay. Does that mean that that he is going to do what? He will ask you to justify every presupposition. That's fine. All right. That'll be interesting. Anyway, this computer scientist, Jeffrey Hinton, says he timed his life perfectly. He is 76 years old. He says, I was born just after the end of World War II. I was a teenager before there was AIDS, and now, so sex, in other words, and now I'm going to die before the end. So he is convinced we're going to be wiped out within the next 20 years. He felt sorry for the students that he was lecturing in front of because they were going to be all killed because of the this whole issue of AI. The AI was going to kill us all. His advice to them, in order to how to survive, his advice was basically to be 76. Because there was no other way to stay alive. There's actually, he says, the probability of the human race surviving is the beyond the next 20 years of AI is basically zero. And this is an attitude more and more people have, and these are people who are taken seriously and respected, and it's out there. It is the, I think it's like bigger, well, it's not bigger. It is replacing climate change as the thing to panic about if you're smart, cool, nerdy, knowledgeable, particularly if you're in computer science. It is the thing, right? All right, let me see what you guys are saying about Jay Dyer. He is an Orthodox Christian apologist, trained in philosophy. He's going to ask me to justify every presupposition. I just won't make any presuppositions. Colt says, let me put it to you this way. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a Christian that actually talks about metaphysics and philosophy more than Dyer, okay? He's a Jedi philosopher. All right. I don't know. What do we do with that? What? So any advice? Any advice you guys want to provide me? It's a debate. So Colt says something else I also want to mention is that if in this debate you're going to try and link Christianity with Platonism, he will challenge that. Another thing to look is that he will challenge what is called classical foundationalism. Yeah, I don't know what classical foundationalism is, but he can challenge the link between Christianity and Platonism all he wants. I'm not debating Christianity with him, but I intend to make that link. That link is obvious. It's clear-cut. It is factual in reality. It is all over the place, and the idea that he would, that he can challenge it again, all he wants. I'm sure he will use a lot of big words. I just don't pay attention to them. I will do what other people do when they debate me. I'll just make my points and let him challenge them with his big words, right? Let him challenge him with the big words. All right. So let me just find this. So this morning, in the Wall Street Journal, I read a story. It basically says that a group, I think led by Blackstone, I think it's Blackstone or Blackshore. I always get the stone, shores, rocks mixed up. Let's see, who is backing this? Yeah, I can't see. I'd have to read the story. Anyway, a group of big time players are establishing a filing for the establishment of a new stock exchange in Texas, in the great old state of Texas. And you will be able to list your company. You will be able to go public on the stock exchange in Texas. It's going to be called TXSE, the Texas Stock Exchange. It will be in Dallas. It is part of the attempt. It's part of the attempt in Dallas. So it was part of the attempt in Dallas to what do you call it? To make Dallas a major financial hub. So here's kind of the press release. This is BlackRock and Citadel. BlackRock and Citadel, two huge players, huge players. So BlackRock and Citadel. They're planning to start a new national stock exchange in Texas, aimed to take on what they see as the onerous regulation at the NYSE and NASDAQ. You see, in a real free market, there wouldn't be an SEC and there wouldn't be national regulations imposed by the government. In a real free market, the regulations of how we trade, the rules, and even the regulations of corporate governance, insider trading, would all be set by the exchanges. The exchange would set those regulations, and then you would pick under what regulations you wanted to play. And the regulations, of course, would not be by law. The regulations would be by contract. If you wanted to list on my exchange, you would follow my regulations. So if I limit insider trading, you can't insider trade or whatever. You're violating a contractual agreement. Now, that is still the case to some extent. That is, the government has a gazillion regulations, a gazillion constraints, and it has a whole SEC dedicated to monitoring and supervising and all of that. But on top of that, every exchange, the NASDAQ, the NYSE, and there are actually, 7, 8 different exchanges in the United States, every exchange has its own subset of regulations on top of the original regulations. So you could say, for example, you could have DEI restrictions that are not set by federal law, but are set by contractual law by an exchange that said you have to have women on the board of directors. And, and if you don't, you can't list on this exchange. Now, we'll get to whether it matters or not in a minute. Anyway, so the Texas Stock Exchange is going to have fewer regulations than the traditional NYSE and NASDAQ. So the press release goes on. The Texas Stock Exchange, which has raised approximately $120 million from individuals and large investment firms, plans to file registration documents with the SEC later this year. CEO James Lee told the Wall Street Journal, the goal is to begin facilitating trades in 2025 and host its first listing in 2026. So again, this is from the article in the Wall Street Journal, not a press release. The exchange is aiming to tap into the dissatisfaction with increasing compliance costs at NASDAQ and NYSE and newer rules like ones setting targets for board diversity at NASDAQ. Backers of the TXSE, as it is known, pledge it will be more CEO friendly. Dallas has become one of, if not the most dominant financial centers in the country, if not the world, Lee said. For months, talk has been swirling in trading community about an upstart, anti-woke exchange. Oh, Scott should definitely list whatever he's listing on this. Anti-woke Should definitely trade on this exchange. Anti-woke exchange launching in Texas, Lee says. The exchange is apolitical, but anti-woke, supposedly. TXSE will be entirely electronic, but it plans to have a physical presence in downtown Dallas, said Lee, a Texan who has worked in finance and trading for around 3 decades. The exchange plans to compete for primary and dual listings, and TXSE also hopes to attract listing of exchange-traded product. All right, so that is the story. To understand, let's try to understand what this means and is this good, bad, and should anybody care? The reality in America is that if you're a national exchange, which again, there are like 8 or 9 of them, if you're a national exchange, then you can trade on all the stocks listed on all the different exchanges. And by law, this is part of the regulations of the SEC and part of the distortion and perversion of regulation of the SEC. By law, brokers, people who trade, people who execute your trade, if you go in and trade, have to trade on that exchange that offers the lowest price. So, you're competing on price. In an unbelievably competitive market for trading, all an exchange is today, we have this image of people yelling at the NYSE, but all exchanges are today are computers, networks of computers. It's not clear why any one exchange has any advantages over another. I guess the one is the criteria by where you list. So companies list on a particular exchange. So some companies will find it attractive to list on this Texas exchange because they want to present themselves as anti-woke or because they want to be CEO friendly. But is CEO friendly a good thing? That is, if you list on an exchange that it says it's CEO friendly, do investors want to invest in a company that's CEO friendly, where there's no oversight, where there's no supervision? Well, maybe if it's Tesla and the CEO's name is Elon Musk, but most people actually want, as shareholders, some oversight over the CEO. We don't want it to be too friendly, maybe a little friendly. And there's no question in my mind that this TXSE is saying it's pledging to be more CEO friendly because of the problems Elon Musk is having with his compensation contract, which we talked about a few weeks ago, where the Delaware court ruled it violated the fiduciary duty of the board. He would rather list and be in a state that is CEO friendly. But is that a good thing, a bad thing? How much money can you make here? Not really much. You make the money on the listing because you're not going to make it much on the trading. Now, given the Citadel is involved, that is interesting, because Citadel is, of course, a massive market maker, and it gets a lot of the Robinhood trades for a variety of reasons, and it's a market. It clears, and it's a market maker, and it's got a lot of the supply chain that is involved in actually trading stock. Citadel owns, so maybe there are economies of scale here. Maybe there's some cost savings here for Citadel to do this. But this is an incredibly competitive area. It's an area where profit margins are being driven to close to zero. Again, volumes as such, maybe a Citadel and a BlackRock don't care. Maybe even with the tiny little margins, they can still make money at it. It just doesn't completely make sense to me. But, they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're doing it. I think it's fairly easy to start an exchange. It's fairly easy. It's completely easy to attract trading because once you have an exchange and it's nationally listed, and you offer good prices, they have to trade with you. Can they attract listings where the money is actually made? I don't know. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if they can or cannot. But So, we'll have another stock exchange. Go competition. And if they can offer something unique, some spin on it, something interesting, it should be pretty cool. It should be pretty cool. All right. Let's see. Maurice says, I'm just going to read this because it's related to my debate. In the first ever Rattlesnake TV live debate, objectivist and writer Yaron Brook takes on author, lecturer, and comedian Jay Dyer. Ooh, it's the comedian that worries me. Comedian, debating a comedian is never easy because they get people with the humor, and I'm not funny. The topic is, can human civilization survive on science and rationality alone? That is the topic. That is the announcement. It's out. It's on Twitter. Yes, I agree to all these things, and I don't really... Yeah, I'll have to think about who this guy is, maybe watch a few things of his to figure out how to engage in this debate, because it sounds like he's very different than the typical person I debate. The typical person I debate. All right, let's see. Where are we? You know what? Let's do the Super Chat questions. Let's move to the Super Chat. And then maybe we will readdress some of these other issues, some of these other stories that I have. Yeah, let me take this one issue, just because, let me take this one story that I read today that I found fascinating, just because I think it's interesting and relates to some of the issues around wars that we've been talking about over the last few months. So, as you know, 80 years to D-Day is coming up. Biden is in France for it. There's a lot of meetings going on in France. There are going to be ceremonies. There's going to be a lot of things going on. Macron is hosting this, and ever since the 1980s or so, D-Day has become a major international kind of event. Well, there's a story today that some of the ceremonies that are going to occur during D-Day are going to actually commemorate the 50,000 Frenchmen, the 50,000 French civilians that were killed by the U.S. and the British while fighting the Nazis. So during the preparation for D-Day, and even while D-Day was happening, American and British bombers were bombing towns, French towns, into oblivion. And while they often, like the Israelis, dropped pamphlets telling the civilians to get out of the way, those flyers, those leaflets often flew away, and the civilians never saw them. Or in some cases, the Nazis blocked exit out of the town so that the civilians would stay there. And the British and the Americans still bombed. And indeed, in the retaking of France, in the liberation of France, well over 50,000 civilians were killed by the Allied forces. France was an ally. France was on our side. It was being occupied by the enemy. But the reality is that war is hell. I think it was Sherman who said that for the first time, at least, as far as I know. And that people die. And that it is impossible to avoid civilian casualties if you're trying to win. And if you're trying to avoid your own casualties of your own troops. Part of the reason to bombing these French towns was to kill the Nazis there, to destroy railroad stations, to destroy the capacity to move weapons, to destroy the capacity to move troops, to destroy intelligence bases, listening stations, to destroy the capacity to kill Americans and British troops. In doing that, French civilians died. And that was just an acceptable, understood, inevitable cost of winning. Cost of winning, right? So I thought that was pretty amazing. Nobody's really apologizing for it. You know, and a lot fewer than the civilians dying in Gaza. A lot fewer than the civilians dying in Gaza died in France. And these were the allies. These were our friends. Just to give you some perspective and proportion around these things. All right. Let us move on to Super Chat. Let's see. I think there were some stickers. John, thank you for the sticker. Mike, thank you for the sticker. And Silvanos, I already thanked. I think that's it. Yeah, I think I got everybody else. All right, we have made a real dent in, you know, the amount of money we need to be raised, but we still have more to do. We still have more room to go. So please consider that. I do need to remind you that the Ayn Rand Institute is a sponsor of the show. You can attend the OCON remotely by signing up as a remote attendee, and you'll have access to the courses and the talks for weeks afterwards. So this is something that you will benefit from long term. Over weeks, you won't have to listen to everything live. You'll have access to it before anybody else. So please sign up, AynRand.org/start here. Sign up for remote access to OCON. And then Alex Epstein, alexepstein.substack.com. Alex is the world leader, expert on issues relating to climate change, environmentalism, and fossil fuels. Sign up for his Substack, where you'll get his talking points. And you can also have access to his premium service, which will provide you with, Alex AI, which is Alex, an AI trained on everything Alex does. All right, are we good? Is there an issue with the internet? Everything good here? Everything good? Seems to be back. That's good. That's good. All right, let's take your questions. There are a lot of them. I got a lot of questions today. All right, James. Why are so many Israelis so bleeding-hearted? Haven't they learned by now that only strength prevails in the Middle East? Only strength prevails in the Middle East. If someone went after my family, there's no way I'd make a deal with them. I don't think this is unique to the Middle East. I think this is true in Europe. I think this is true in America. This is true in anybody. Anyway, the only way to deal with a bully is to beat him. You cannot negotiate with those committed to using force. You cannot negotiate with those committed to your death. And it's not that strength prevails. It's ultimately the reason prevails, and reason is on Israel's side, and reason is what allows them to have the weapons that they have and the strength that they have, and allows them to have the ability to crush their enemies. But no, they haven't learned, because the fundamental driver of human action, is morality, is what people believe is good or bad. And Israel, like the rest of the West, like the whole world really, is committed to and have embraced sacrifice. They've embraced, individual self-sacrifice for some greater good, and for the good of those, and for the sake, usually, mostly, in the West at least, for the sake of those suffering and those in need. And certainly Israel, in that sense, is as altruistic as anybody else is. They have the experience, but morality trumps experience over and over and over again. Morality trumps experience. It's hard to It's hard for people to comprehend. It's hard for people to really understand. It's hard for people to really, get it. But the reality is that morality trumps everything else in human decision making at the end of the day. Hopper Campbell, do conservatives not realize Reagan and Thatcher won by huge margins, moving both countries in fair directions? Milei will likely win re-election. We have to stop assuming freedom agendas won't work politically. But it's not clear that they do. I mean, you're assuming they do. Margaret and Thatcher won in the 1970s and 80s. We're now in the 2020s. And it's absolutely not clear that in the 2020s, an agenda that is pro-freedom would win. Certainly, when asked in the polls, nobody's interested in freedom and in those kind of ideas. And Milei won, I think, for a number of extraordinary reasons. One, the dire strait Argentina was in. And two, his ability to attract a crowd, his ability to get people to listen to him, which is unique. And I expect him to be reelected because I think the things that he's going to do are going to make Argentina healthier and better, and therefore people will reelect him in order to move in that direction. But not because they now have a deep understanding of the virtue of liberty and the virtues of freedom. They don't. And in many respects, the Milei experiment could be a very short, fleeting experiment. We'll see. But no, I don't think that, running on a platform that is free market and pro-liberty and all that is right now winnable. What people care about is immigration. That's what they care about. That's it. And the solution they want is not solutions like I'm suggesting. That is a non-starter. A non-starter. Anyway, I'm less optimistic as you are, Hopper, that the American public, the European public are just eager for just a capitalist defense, and they would vote for it. I don't think Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher today would win. James says, while anger can be a virtue when it comes to defending values and identifying injustices, is anger typically a vice because it's instantly gratifying, but you regret it later? Well, I don't know that it's typically a vice. It's a vice under the conditions that you articulated. If it's instantly gratifying, but you'll regret it later, if it doesn't come from a source of real consideration and real values, if it's not properly identified, if you act on it without really thinking. And look, anger is an emotion. So anger is not a vice or virtue. Anger is what it is. It's an emotion. So you don't call an emotion a vice or a virtue. Acting on anger is a vice, particularly if you're going to regret it later. But feeling angry is neither vice nor virtue. It's just a feeling. It might be justified feeling. It might be an unjustified feeling. It's the action that is the challenge. And acting on your anger without thought is always a vice, just like acting on any emotion with no thought is a vice. Right? Yeah, the Messian libertarians, the Mises Caucus is not going to be pro-Milei because Milei has a foreign policy that negates the exact opposite of theirs. I'm still excited about Milei. I mean, he's still giving lectures where he's teaching people economics all over the world. It's still fun to watch. Andrew, I hear your reluctance to label the anti-Israels as idealists, but I do think there is idealism there, the Christian-based savior of the weak. The pro-Israels agree with that ideal and thus cede the more high ground. I agree with that, but it's suspect, and this is why I think they're primarily nihilist, that in order to find the weak, they have to cross the ocean. And that's what gets them excited. There are plenty of weak over here. There are plenty of suffering over here. But they really get excited about weak way over there on the other side of the ocean. So I still think, yes, there's certainly altruism is driving them. Certainly, an ideology of altruism. But what's ultimately driving them, but what's really, and which encompasses this, driving them is egalitarianism. And egalitarianism is fundamentally nihilistic. Fundamentally nihilistic. So yeah, you could pull out an ideal there, the ideal of altruism. And they hold altruism. But in the service not of helping the weak, but really in the service of destruction. And you see that partially by the distance this has from any concern they have in their own life or any visible thing going on in the world around them. John, I understand that a new stock exchange being considered in Dallas. Would this significant economic development? No, I mean, there's no. It's a meaningless. Economically, it's meaningless. It's very little employment in Dallas. It's just basically a bunch of computers and algorithms or software, and it'll be run by Citadel and BlackRock. They will supposedly make a little bit of money out of it, but that's it. There is a Discord server associated with this chat, with the show. I don't participate in it. I'm never on it. I don't. I've been on Discord a few times. I've done some debates on Discord, but I don't go on Discord ever of my own voluntary volition, other than if I have to be there for a debate. But somebody give him the address of the Discord channel associated with this chat. Anyway. James, how do you view living part-time as an expat in one of these countries, the UK, Italy, Greece, Switzerland, or France? How do you rank these countries based on objectivism? Do you think any of them have a bright future? You can't rank countries based on objectivism. You can rank them based on how free market they are, how pleasant they are to live, but that's up to you. That's very individual. Philosophy doesn't have much to say about what country you should live in. Now, I love London. I love the UK. It's a great city. It's a great place. I don't like the weather, but, living there part-time is not a bad idea. Very expensive, though. Very expensive. Italy is beautiful. There's tons to do. There's tons to see. I don't think anywhere near as expensive. Much cheaper. You can probably go to Milan, or if you want to stay in Florence or Rome, you can live somewhere in Tuscany. Great quality and standard of living, I think you can have there. Not a very free economy, very corrupt, not very particularly efficient. You're going to be frustrated by a lot of it, right? Greece, very similar to Italy. Beautiful, amazing place, very cheap to live, economically not that great, inefficient, frustrating. Everything on the Mediterranean you're going to find frustrating. Frustrating service, just not up to American or Northern European standards. Switzerland, incredibly efficient, but very, very expensive. And in terms of the market, of all the countries you listed, probably the freest of all of them. France, beautiful, lots to do, lots to see. Frustrating because you're surrounded by the French, who can be very frustrating, and probably not a particularly free market, not a particularly ambitious people from that perspective. I mean, Switzerland is the most capitalist, and Switzerland and the UK are the most America-like in terms of ambition. Switzerland probably the most efficient. But London is pretty efficient. London's a pretty good place to live. But of course, with efficiency comes cost. They're also super expensive. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Let me gift another 5 memberships. I did that yesterday. I think I'd do 10 a month. Might as well do it early in the month. All right, David, your first time super chat here. Thanks for listening live. I appreciate it. Let's see. David says, I read Bill Maher's new book, and he spent several pages disparaging Ayn Rand. That's too bad. Why is that she is assumed to be a libertarian? Well, because they don't know where to categorize her, right? They don't know what bucket to put her in. She's obviously not on the left. She's obviously not a conservative because she's an atheist. Where do they put her? What is she? So the bucket that seems to fit her best, because they can't think in terms of nuanced philosophy, the bucket that seems to fit her best is the bucket of, the libertarians. They're pro-free market, they tell us. You can be secular and libertarian. Libertarianism doesn't require you to be religious, even though many of them are. So they're secular, the pro-free markets, they claim. It kind of fits. And nobody really, particularly somebody like Bill Maher, doesn't think about philosophy. They don't consider the philosophical roots. They don't consider what she has unique to say about philosophy. They just know her as a defender of capitalism, and she's for selfish people. But she doesn't. They don't view it as real philosophy. So they can't categorize her as a philosopher, and they can't categorize her outside, therefore, of the traditional political categories. I guess that's my best explanation. And then, it's sad because they don't delve into material. They don't try to understand it. They don't try to understand her philosophy. And therefore, they, as you say, disparage her. And usually they're disparaging some things that she didn't even stand for. They're beating her up for positions she didn't have just because they didn't understand it. They didn't understand it. Thank you, David. Really appreciate the question. Appreciate the support. All right. Give me 30 seconds. I'll be right back. All right, what I need is pre-recorded content for the breaks, like my sponsors and all that. We should do, I should have that pre-recorded for the break. Press a button, it plays while I go off. But here I am. I'm back. Don't worry, nothing happened. Let's see. You guys got a stopwatch on me? All right, Jason. Today, Czechs approved legislation allowing citizens from 9 non-EU countries, including the US, Canada, Israel, and Singapore, to work in the Czech Republic without permits starting in July. Wow. That is amazing. That is what an amazing step in the right direction. I'm curious what the other countries are, but it's US, Canada, Israel, Singapore. And how long? Is there any length limitation? Can they become ultimately Czech citizens? I'm curious how it really plays out and what's really involved. I mean, this could be a real option for a lot of people. There you go. James was asking about places to live. I mean, Prague is a beautiful, beautiful city. It's really nice there. And if you can do it without any constraints, it's very central in Europe. You can get anywhere from the Czech airport. And it's a nice, it's a beautiful city. It's, people are friendly. And it's relatively free market. And it doesn't seem like it's moving away from free markets. And the Czech Republic is one of the few places that has not seen a real rise in populism, in right-wing populism. She is still seeing a kind of a liberal, in a positive sense, trend in the Czech Republic, whereas other parts of Europe are moving away from that. All right, James, are there no contradictions in nature, only in ideas? Yeah, there are no contradictions in nature. Things cannot be what they are and not what they are. A cannot be B at the same time. A can change into B, but it cannot be B at the same time as it's A. Things cannot act against their nature. Their nature is what it is. So there are no contradictions. There are no contradictions in nature. You can only have contradictions in your ideas, in your understanding, in your interpretation. And yep. I mean, that's a basic metaphysical principle. It comes from the basic axioms. The axioms are no contradictions. Are the intellectuals' resentments towards people of ability as strong today as they were in the 1930s, where everyone in New York Times was promoting communism? I mean, but the funny thing is, right, this is the weird thing, that communism is not opposed to ability as much as the modern left is. This is what makes egalitarianism, the kind of ideology the left has today, much worse than communism. In communism, to each according to his need, from each according to his ability. Communism recognizes that there's such a thing as ability. And it just says, well, they need to contribute more. They need to be sacrificed for the people without ability. In today's world, ability? Who the hell are you to have even ability? There's no such thing as differences in ability. You all have to be the same. And if you're good at something, we'll break your legs and make sure you're not good at it anymore. We'll make sure you're going to be the same. In that sense, egalitarianism is more barbaric, more destructive, more homicidal, more murderous than communism, if you can believe that. So in that sense, the intellectual resentment today is much greater. So at the time, a communist would say, yeah, Bezos, God, he's making so much money. We need to have a 99% tax on them and take as much of his wealth away from him. Today, it's like Bezos shouldn't even be allowed to be Bezos. We should have broken him right at the beginning. We should have prevented him from achieving anything. Not just taxed it away from him, but broken him. So I think in many respects, they're even worse today. Clark, if Trump loses, how do you see the Republican Party changing, even if he only loses by a little? He still lost twice. Yeah, no, I don't think the Republican Party changes if he loses by a little. I have said now for 2 elections, I mean, my ideal scenario for the election, and this is true in 2020 and it's true in 2024. My ideal scenario, and I know people are going to make hay of this, but this is reality. My ideal scenario is in both 2020 and 2024 that Trump lose by a landslide and Republicans regain the House and Senate. That's my ideal scenario. It's not going to happen, but that's my ideal scenario. Because that is the only way that that you can get that you will get a change in the Republican Party. So Trump losing by a little is still really, really bad. Trump winning by a little is really, really bad. So, you know, the difference between him winning and losing by a little bit, it's not a huge difference because his destructiveness over the Republican Party will sustain. It's only a landslide that will make a difference. And I said this in 2020, and then I thought, for a few days, I thought that he had behaved so horrifically on January 6th that what happened January 6th would turn the entire Republican Party against him. And in the beginning, if you remember, in the hours and a few days afterwards, a lot of the Republican leaders came out against Trump. They all condemned him. And then he reasserted his superiority. He reasserted his control. And everybody, you know, lined up behind him. And again, January 6th disqualifies him from being president. I mean, there are a lot of things that disqualify him, but that certainly does. And that should be obvious to anybody and obvious to the Republicans. And they don't. So now, you know, we're back to he has to lose in a landslide, but he won't lose in a landslide. So what do? You guys will have to choose who to vote for. Frank, can Detroit plan be used to resurrect Haiti? No, because nobody has an incentive to resurrect Haiti. There are no billionaires who would, you know, the billionaires in Detroit are Detroit natives who are investing in their native town and, you know, want to have a big impact, and there's huge upside potential. What's the potential in Haiti? Haiti is a dump. It's always been a dump. It's never been good. It's never been positive. And the reality is that Haiti needs, first and foremost, it needs a government. It needs a police force. It needs law and order. And only then can it get any kind of economic development. So the first thing Haiti needs, and sooner the better, is, law and order. And it's so corrupt, Haiti, it makes Detroit look like, a game. So no, I don't think you can have that approach. You'd have to be a lot more aggressive on the law enforcement side. And then I'm not sure how you motivate people to invest there. I just don't know. Michael says, no amount of evidence will ever persuade an idiot, Mark Twain. I don't think that has to do with, well, it depends what you count as an idiot. Is an idiot just a person of low intelligence? I don't know that it's an issue of level of intelligence. It's an issue of evasion, and I'm not sure that is an issue of idiocy. Maybe it is. Maybe idiot is an evader rather than somebody with low intelligence. Michael asks, is John Mearsheimer an anti-Semite? I don't know. I don't like John Mearsheimer. I think he's terrible. I think he's a Putin accolade. He might be in the pay of Putin. I don't know. I think his analysis is superficial and wrong. But is he an anti-Semite? I just haven't heard anything which suggests he is. But I wouldn't put him beyond him, given that I think he's terrible. John says, Scott Schiff is the only thing standing between civilization and barbarians. Who is Scott Schiff? I don't know who Scott Schiff is. Scott Schiff is the only thing standing between civilization and barbarians. Okay, somebody's got a new guru. Oh, wait. I don't know who Scott Schiff is. Debate Anything says there seems to have been agitators on the scene of January 6th. Yeah, Donald Trump. State agitators. He was president at the time. He is the state. Oh, Scott Schiff is Scott on the chat. He is the only thing standing between civilization and barbarism. Hard to tell with John if he's serious or not. So, Michael, Leonard Peikoff said Kant was Plato without the paganism. What did he mean by that? Well, he meant by that they were both, in a sense, their philosophy is a philosophy of mysticism. Kant is ultimately, the type of mysticism is he's trying to save Christianity. Obviously, Plato was a paganist, but they all both divorce human reason from reality. They both place reality, the real reality, beyond the ability or the contact with of human reason, human sense perception, and human reason, and so that is what he meant, is that philosophically they're very, very, very similar, particularly in their epistemology, and primarily in the epistemology and metaphysics, and that the only difference really is that the reach, the mysticism is, coming in from a different perspective, one pagan, one Christian. Liam, what type of medication would be best for Scott? I think the best medication for Scott would be you guys ignoring him. I think that would be the best medication. So ignore him. Particularly if he bugs you, just ignore him. Right? He thrives on your attention and my attention. I'm doing my best to ignore him. You should too. Kabuta, follow-up from yesterday. How can competition for workers increase wages if there's a glut of labor due to technology at the same time? There's never a glut of labor. Every time there's massive technological innovation, what you get is a shortage of labor. And it happens every time. So technology creates more jobs than there are people, always. So was there a glut of labor during the Industrial Revolution? No, quite the opposite. There was a shortage of labor. Think about all the migrations towards where the jobs were, towards the factories, from the fields into the cities to the factories to take up the jobs. Because the jobs are being created. Think right now, technological revolution, lots of robots, all this stuff. Can't fill all the jobs that are available in the United States right now. So under any kind of free market, there is never a glut of labor. All the farmers are replaced by tractors, but the farmers go do something. There's always jobs for farmers. Maybe not in farming, but somewhere. So There's always competition for workers, and particularly there's competition for workers with high productivity. But there's just never been an example in history where there's a glut of labor during technological innovation. Meribens, shout out to first philosophy at work. Capitalism is like fine champagne, but what about the ports? Inside joke between her and her boyfriend, but she pays for it, so she's allowed to have the inside joke. All right, Colt says, I heard you're debating, we talked about this, Jay Dyer. I'll have to look him up. Now everybody's concerned about my debating Jay. I'll have to look him up. Godzilla -1 is on Netflix. I know. I look forward to your review when you have time. I really believe you will love this movie. I expect I will. I'm looking forward to watching it. Chili W. Can you recommend a good heroic movie that's not based on a true story? I mean, according to James, Godzilla -1 would be such a movie. I don't know. I mean, a good heroic movie, Terminator 2, both Terminators, are good heroic movies that are not based on a true story, the science fiction. Last of the Mohican is, I think, a good heroic movie, not based on a true story. The original, IEN says the original Flight of the Phoenix is a great movie. The original one, not the modern version, but the original one from the 50s, I think it is a great heroic story of heroism. And there, the heroism is a heroism of the mind, not a heroism of manifested in physical strength. Those are good, really good heroic movies. There are lots of them. There are lots of heroic movies with that are not based on true stories. Maurice says he's a big fish, Yaron. Haha, he's slippery like an eel. Just don't let him take you down the rabbit hole. I will try my best. Did you watch the latest Zulu conversation with Michael Leibowitz? No, I didn't. I don't know what Zulu conversation is. I don't know where you think I spend my time. I don't have time to spend watching stuff on YouTube. I have to prepare for these shows that consumes and teach and prepare lectures and do classes for the what do you call it, academy, for the Peterson Academy and all this. I don't have time. I don't know who Liquid Zulu is. Who's Liquid Zulu? Are they the ones who invited me to do this talk? I have no idea. Stuff. All right. Anyway, thank you all. Really, really appreciate it. I will see you all tomorrow, same time. Who am I debating? Who am I supposed to be debating? Liquid Zulu? I don't know. You guys have lost me on the chat. All right, everybody. See you tomorrow. Thank you to all the super chatters. Thank you for the support. We will reconvene 2 p.m. East Coast time tomorrow for another show. And I probably have a bunch of announcements I should be making, but there it is. I will now prep for the debate. So thank you for all the people who have warned me about the debate. I don't know who's the anarcho-capitalist. Daya? No. Bye, everybody.